Mr. Freckman?
Well, this backs up our top story, which we're finally getting to because that tweet is incredible, recapping the column that has shaken the White House. A senior White House official, writing anonymously, claims to be part of the resistance on the inside. The official claims that the op-ed that President Trump is amoral and that many senior administration officials are, quote, working diligently from within to frustrate parts of his agenda and his worst inclinations. Meetings with him, the essay continues, veer off topic and off the rails. He engages in repetitive rants, and his impulsiveness results in half-baked, ill-informed, and occasionally reckless decisions that have to be walked back. The official says, quote, Americans should know that there are adults in the room. We fully recognize what is happening, and we are trying to do what's right, even when Donald Trump won't.
Let's bring in right now from Capitol Hill, a member of the Intelligence Committee, Independent Senator Angus King of Maine, who coincidentally in his first race for governor had bumper stickers that said, "Thank you to Chairman Kim." So that went over very well in Maine's second congressional district. They love Kim and Bangor.
No,
Kim and Bangor.
Come on.
So first of all, we want to get to, yesterday you talked to Twitter's Jack Dorsey and Facebook Sheryl Sandberg during a hearing. We're going to get to that in a moment.
Absolutely.
First, what's your response to the president's tweet? He says, "Thank you to Chairman Kim. We will get it done together."
Well, I think it points out one of the real problems is a lack of historical knowledge and grounding. This is the fifth time we've been around this dance with North Korea. Every time they talk about denuclearization, we make some concessions, they get something going, and then they back away from it. So the idea of declaring victory or even progress at the thin level that we're at now is dangerous in the sense, and I think one of your guests just mentioned this, it sets up expectations that I just don't think can be met. What worries me is what happens when the president realizes that this is indeed not going to work. And I hope it does, by the way. I want to emphasize that. I hope it does. It might. Kim might be a different guy than his father and his grandfather. But if it doesn't, then where are we? And do we get a lurch from maybe too much optimism to some kind of military strike, which would be, incredibly dangerous if you talk to anybody in the Pentagon. So that's what's worrisome about this is this high expectation, the kind of exuberance, and then inevitably, at least based on history, there's going to be a letdown.
Right.
Yep. And if you were watching the show earlier, former CIA Director Brennan was talking about not just the president tweeting something like this, but a massive deflection in light of this op-ed that came out in the New York Times. Heidi Przybyla, I just want to ask you a question, then you can take it to the senator. Is there any reaction on Capitol Hill to the op-ed in the New York Times?
Reached out to sources on both sides of the aisle last night, Mika. The Democrats were happy to let the op-ed, quote, speak for itself. Republicans, very quiet, with one notable exception, Senator Bob Corker, who I think really summarized in general what the issue has been all along on Capitol Hill with the reaction or lack of reaction to Trump. He said, this is, quote, what all of us understood from day one, and it's why we've encouraged the good people like Mattis to stay, and that I thank him every time I see him. But in a way, this also encapsulates the problem, Mika, right, is that no one, including this author, is willing to speak out on the record. I was thinking about this last night, and the fact that none of us can really name a single administration official who's either resigned in protest or been pushed out and then spoken out and given information on the record, put their name, their reputation out there for the American people to see. And to the extent, though, that this is a shifting point on Capitol Hill, I do think it reflects the same sentiment and emotions that a lot of Republicans are having right now ahead of the midterms as they look at these plummeting numbers and they start to get this gut sense that perhaps this is really going to hurt, and in a way that may be worse than just losing the House.
Wow.
So, Senator King, you've actually said, as we talk about this op-ed that was published by the New York Times, when you vote on Trump appointees, you've considered the adult in the room factor. That is to say, you want somebody who will push back against President Trump's impulses. So what's your reaction to what you read in the New York Times yesterday?
Well, I've taken some flack for voting for some of those nominees, particularly on the foreign policy side, but that was the driving piece of my decision. I wanted to be sure that there were people there who could provide some rational arguments, some resistance, some, as they say, resistance to what otherwise might be impulsive acts. I think, and I disagree a little bit with your reporter. If this person came forward and said who they were, they'd be fired immediately, and we will have lost a restraint, a rail, if you will, a guardrail. I think some of these people in this administration, particularly at the upper levels, are they're making a very difficult career decision. They're saying, I'm going to be tainted by this. I don't like being involved with what's going on. On the other hand, if I leave, what's going to be the guardrail, and where do we go from here? And I think this whoever this person is, and I don't know who it is, but they've made a very difficult choice, at least thus far, to try to be protective of the national interest.
Senator, on another topic, yesterday Jack Dorsey and Sheryl Sandberg appeared before the Senate. Twitter, Facebook, talk about difficult choices. Twitter is doing something to the culture that has been unheard of, obviously. I mean, you know, people on their phones looking at it. What's going to happen? Is it going to be regulated? Where are you going on this?
I don't think so. I hope not. I think if we try to start regulating the internet, I don't know where that stops. I would much rather, and I think the hearing yesterday was a really kind of interesting one from the point of view of what goes on up here. If you were watching from the audience, you couldn't tell who were Republicans and who were Democrats on the committee. It was more like a working group trying to jointly confront and solve a problem, which is the misuse of social media, particularly by foreign adversaries. So I think a lot of it, and this is uncharted territory. This is a new technology. We have to try to figure out how to prevent it being misused, particularly, as I say, by adversaries from around the world. At the same time, we don't want to create constraints on the vigorous debate about issues. And by the way, before I forget, I just want to tell John Meacham, I'm just finishing Soul of America. I think it's one of the most important books been published in this country in the last few years. John, thank you. It's a real contribution to what's going on now and putting it in historical perspective. I couldn't resist having this opportunity.
Oh, Senator, Meacham did not need that.
Yeah.
His head is big enough.
We rebut that. Yeah, come on.
His official photographer actually snapped a picture of
Just
what
now.
you were saying.
Senator, I'll be voting absentee in Maine as often as possible for you. So
There you go. I've got one.
Thank you.
Anyway.
All right. Senator Angus King, thank you very much for being on the show this morning.